Hi, I'm Brian Welk here in the Wraps virtual Sundance studio for 2022. And today I'm joined by the team from Meet Me in the Bathroom. I have directors Dylan Southern and Will Lovelace and author Lizzie Goodman. Thank you all so much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
So Lizzie, let's start with you. Your book, Meet Me in the Bathroom, has become in the last few years just like one of those just documents that it's of this era. I think it's just one of the seminal rock books and histories. It's incredible. And when you were writing it, did you have any inkling of like, well, this could be a film someday, or this could be, its own project that's going to be premiering at Sundance?
No. I'm laughing because somebody asked me the other day why I didn't just, since it was so obviously going to make a great film, having seen Will and Dylan's great film, why didn't we just start there? Like, why did I bother writing the book? And I was like, it is a great testament to the success of the project that anyone would ever think that was like a I mean, that's an absurd thing to, at the time when I started writing this book, that would have been like laughable. When I first told my friend Ryan Gentles, our mutual friend Ryan Gentles, who's the Strokes manager and a very old friend of mine, that I was doing this, he was one of the first people I contacted when I decided to write the book, and he was like, I mean, yeah, cool, I'll help you, but like, is anyone going to care? I mean, it was sort of like, oh, Lizzie, that's cute that you want to spend the next decade of your life, digging into all this stuff that no one's going to ever read. So no, I definitely didn't think during the many years it took to get this fully finished that this would ever be happening. And it's really cool. It's really gratifying. And just like, I'm just on cloud nine generally that these guys took on the project, they made something so amazing, and that we get to be here in Sundance talking about it, even virtually. It's really astonishing.
Will and Dylan, you guys also made Shut Up and Play the Hits. What was it about Meet Me in the Bathroom that made you want to adapt it and made you think that you could take on this daunting task and that there was a film there?
Well, we definitely looked at it and thought, how do you make that into a film at the start? It's like a 10-year history, and it's like a 600-page book, I think. Well, it's a subject area that we kind of both loved. I guess we're a similar age to some of the people in that film, in the book. And it just felt like a really interesting time and place. And obviously the music is the soundtrack is amazing. So it felt like something that, having not actually set out to make another music film, we sort of thought this was the one for us, really.
Yeah. And I think when we first tackled it, the initial concept was that, maybe this is a 4-part series for a streamer or something like that. And eventually we kind of wrestled it into, but this would just make a single document would be so much more satisfying. And I guess the sort of hard work was, so who do we include? How do we structure this? How do we make it its own thing? Because the book is an amazing, book, but a film can do something different. So our first thing was that we just wanted to do something that kept the spirit of the book. Because when you read the book, you're hearing all these voices and it feels like a live conversation that's happening. And with film, we have the sort of added bonus that we can kind of drop people visually into that period. And we just wanted to make a film that didn't break that spell. So, didn't want talking heads interviews, didn't want, voices that weren't part of the story telling the story. So it was a real process. Like, we're huge fans of New York as a city. We're huge fans of music. We had kind of said our next film wouldn't be a music documentary, but it was hard not to get excited about Meet Me in the Bathroom.
Everyone wants music docs now. They're all the big thing. I mean, you're right about the flow of this film and the flow of the book, because the book has this very conversational quality of like, here's Albert Hammond talking about, oh yeah, and so-and-so was there, and then they appear, there's a quote from them, and it just all has that whole flow, and the movie is able to bounce around in that same way and captures that feeling. But I want to know, what were some of your challenges in putting this together, really all through archival footage without any talking heads or new interviews? What was the process there?
I mean, it's the first time we've made a film this way, 100% archive. Our first film about Blur was kind of 50% a live story that was happening with the reunion tour and 50% historical. So we'd kind of done archive in a way, but then our second film was a concert film. So this one, it was a completely new practice for us. And I mean, the challenge was, the brilliant thing about Lizzie's book is, there's all of these sources that are just oral, so you can kind of construct the story. We had to find the pictures to go with those stories, or find pictures that told different stories, and that involved more detective work. We're used to going onto sets and filming, but on this film it was kind of a team effort with our researchers, our producer Vivian, our editors Sam and Andrew, and it was a real collaborative kind of effort to just any possible route to find archive was taken. So whether that be leads from people on the ground in New York, or whether it be going onto an old chat room and seeing that somebody had been at a show and filmed it, we were kind of over 2 or 3 years, we were just very, very kind of slowly but surely building up this incredible bank of archive that came. Some of it had been in a lockup for 20 years, some was under people's beds, some were photographs that had yet to be developed. We got a case full of 35mm films that basically had been undeveloped since 2001, and so it was a real in-depth process. We went through periods where we're like, well, how are we going to tell this part of the story? We've got nothing. And then you'd get that amazing, there's a lot of kind of peaks and troughs of excitement that something had come in at the last minute. I mean, we got LCD Sound System's first ever show right at the 11th hour, so it was just constantly evolving film.
It was also exciting searching out and finding early interviews as well, stuff that people hadn't heard before, that someone had recorded on a dictaphone 20 years ago. And that kind of, I think, gives the film a certain quality, because you've got a mixture of people talking and, slightly looking back, but you've also got people in the moment who are being interviewed on backstage as they're about to go on or to play a show or on tour or whatever. So I think finding that stuff as well gave the film gave it its voice a little bit, really.
And we got hold of a bunch of journal. It was good being in the UK, because obviously the music press here is insane, or it was insane. And there were people who had whole caches of tapes of interviews that they'd done. So some of the audio that's in the film comes from contemporaneous interviews with people. So we were able to make it, what we didn't want to make was a behind the music type documentary. We wanted to make something that feels kind of lives and breathes, and you feel like you've been dropped into that time. And yeah, I think the other thing, COVID really helped us out weirdly, because we were going to come to New York and shoot some bits at first, but COVID allowed us to make it 100% archive. And then it also meant that a lot of people were stuck in their houses and they had the time to go up into the attic, or to kind of they were a lot more amenable to being given a task than they might have been if their normal lives were going on. So, I mean, I'm not saying thank God for COVID or anything.
That's the headline.
Yeah. Right. Lizzie, did you have input in saying this is going to be this? We need these bands, and how do we pick and choose between all the different stories, and who do we leave on the cutting room floor? What is essential in really capturing that era?
No, thank God, that was not my task to. No, that was I mean, the joke. It's not a joke. The first draft with Meet Me in the Bathroom, which as those of us who've read it know is not a short book as it is, was 1,000 pages. So
wow.
I filed 1,000 pages to my editor, God bless her. And so I already had gone through a version of that with in the making of the book itself, of just sort of really thinking about what the story is. And I would defend the text as tight. Like I for me, it was like, this is the essential, these are the essential components, even though it's so long. So no, I didn't have, I mean, it was really fun actually to watch somebody else, both sort of in a kind of like schadenfreude way, like watch somebody else struggle with this, but also in the sense of just trusting these storytellers in their own medium to kind of, to tackle a problem that I didn't have, because I didn't have to figure out how to make this story work in a visual format. There's just so many different factors in terms of, in some ways you can get certain things done faster, and in other ways it takes a lot more time. I mean, it's just a completely different medium. So no, I didn't really like participate in that. That was all them, but I'm really proud of the result. I mean, I think the film, the essential core elements of the book are really represented in a much fuller way in this film than I could ever have hoped for. And in a way it scratched an itch that I had while I was making it too. I was writing the book, which was this sense of like the fantasy of having a whole team of people who want to track down archive that brings this all to light. Like if I'd ever known when I was actually writing the book, like, there was just no resources for stuff like that. Like the photos in the book are great, but that's like me asking some friends to give to bring something visual to life, to help bring some element of the visual story to life. And this was like a total fantasy to get to see these professional people actually tackle that problem, or that it's not really a problem, to tackle that task and have it be such a successful result.
And we're not really that professional either. So,
I'm trying, this is for TV or something. Like, I'm just trying to like big you up for the No, they were amazing. So
was there stuff that surprised you as you were revisiting some of this footage? I mean, of either stories you knew or stories you had forgotten about some of these bands, or or even looking back at some of these bands now 20 plus years removed from this era.
For me personally,
anyone, yeah. Lizzie, was there anything else now seeing it all visually that brought back certain memories?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not so much for me personally. It's less surprise and more like affirmation and emotion. I mean, I've said this before to Will and Dylan, but in a way, the whole Meet Me in the Bathroom story kind of eluded me in terms of the actual like emotional impact of it, like the joy that people have felt, which is amazing, reading it in that I never had that, I didn't really have the kind of, oh my God, this was our time and I'm feeling it coming back at me from a piece of art. I never had that experience until I saw the trailer that these guys made even before we started working on way early. They had put this I don't know, couple minute trailer together. And I was like, okay, I might be crying. Like this, like, I feel like I actually understand just that I was a part of something really beautiful and meaningful. And that I got to sort of experience the viewer side of that. So I think a lot of the time when that continued to be the case throughout the make, that feeling never left. And certainly is very present now. And I think whenever there was new archive that they shared with me that was like particularly exciting, if they'd get really psyched about something, I'd get some, sneak peeks. And those moments were always just like, oh my God, I might've been at that show. I feel like I saw that tour. Some weird dusty memory is coming back to me. Like it was really cool. It was really fun. And writing the book was not that fun most of the time. So it was meaningful, but it was hard. So, this has been way more fun for me.
Looking back at this period, what was it about New York in the early aughts that managed to produce all these bands in one place and at one time? And, given our digital world and everything, can you recreate that magic, and find it again in a certain space and a certain time? I don't want to do the whole rock is dead argument again, but there is something. Can you find that magic again? Can we recreate it or something? Maybe, yeah.
I mean, it was kind of the perfect storm, really, wasn't it? There was a vacuum in terms of like good music. There was a bunch of people to fill that vacuum, and then suddenly the eyes of the world are on New York for other reasons, as well as, you know, the music that was coming out of there. And we were talking earlier, like it happened at the point at the cusp of change, you know, technological, cultural, political. So I think, Lizzie, you described it earlier as like 100 years in 2 years or something,
Yeah.
which, you know, probably speaks to that point better than me. But it couldn't happen like that again, but hopefully it can happen again. But we're too old to know about it.
Another recurring theme. Yeah, I would just say, I think, well, I mean, you're part of what we shared in our early conversations, Will, Dylan, and me, about like how this, why, just what the film they wanted to make was like, and, you know, what my views were on what a successful adaptation or sort of interpretation would look like. I mean, that was pretty key. We all kind of came to it with this sense of, I think these guys really had in mind early an attraction to this story that very much had to do, not to put words into your mouth, so tell me if this is not, but I heard like, oh, they see that this is this, as you guys have put it, flash bulb moment, a kind of like a moment where I think of it as like sliding doors between one century and another, one era of like human experience and another. And that the kind of the shimmering in between point where it hasn't quite left where it was and it hasn't quite landed where it's going is like our story. That's where the story happens. This sort of fundamental instability. The firmament is not solid under your feet. There's some literal ways in which that's true. But it's also just like, the generation that came of age in this particular moment has a kind of anxiety and insecurity to it that is a reflection of the time. And I don't think that first of all, in all coming of age stories are the same and they're all different, you know, like, so this is the part that makes this one particular to us. But what is true is that there's going to be plenty more cool coming of age stories, and we are too old to know what they are. And I look forward to seeing those films and reading those books when they come out. But the way this happened was the last of an era. So in some ways, the model for like how there's way less difference between how we thought of grunge inventing itself between that and what our generation experienced. There's a lot more similarities than there will be, or even between like the Dylan story or the sort of like 60s, you know, invention of a rock star story, like all of that since since Elvis, I think, is all kind of the same model, basically. And that ended. Like to me, that's over. But the fact of people finding each other creatively and building scenes together and being influenced by each other and, you know, expressing youth in a particular way with music, like, no, that's eternal.
And it's going to be a hell of a lot easier for our future counterparts to find the archive for their documentary.
That's right. Those bastards don't know what we've gone through. No, yeah.
Good luck to them.
And the good news is that so many of these bands, their story is still being written, and it's interesting to see them, you know, when they're babies and doing this stuff. So thank you all for joining me today. And yes, it's a fascinating film, and glad I got to experience it as well. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Sundance.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.